All right, hello there, thrill seekers. That was the old Buzzcocks song, I Don't Mind, and I thought that was an appropriate introduction for a topic somebody suggested to me. They wanted to hear about the Zen concept of Mushin. And Mushin is just a fancy Japanese pronunciation of an old Chinese concept, and it translates usually to no mind. And somebody wanted me to talk about no mind, Mushin. So I had this kind of talk planned out, and I kind of thought about what I wanted to say about Mushin and no mind. And just kind of at the last minute, as I was preparing to walk out here and put my equipment out and get ready to do the talk, I thought, let me just see what the internet has to say about Mushin. So I typed in Zen Mushin in Google, and I got some interesting results. So I realized, this is why people are asking me to talk about Mushin, because this is what they've seen on the internet about Mushin. So let me just start off with reading you what Wikipedia has to say about Mushin, okay? So here's what Wikipedia says. Mushin in Japanese and Wushin in Chinese is a mental state. Zen and Taoist meditators attempt to reach this state, as well as artists and trained martial artists. They also practice this mental state during everyday activities. The term is shortened to Mushin no Shin, which means mind of no mind. That's what it means. I'm just translating that on the fly. That is a mind not fixed or occupied by thought or emotion, and thus open to everything. It is translated by D.T. Suzuki as being free from mind attachment. Mushin is achieved when a person's mind is free from thoughts of anger, fear, or ego during combat or everyday life. There is an absence of discursive thought and judgment, so the person is totally free to act and react towards an opponent without hesitation and without disturbance from such thought. At this point, a person relies not on what they think should be the next move, but what is their trained natural reaction or instinct, or what is felt intuitively. It is not a state of relaxed near sleepfulness, however. The mind could be said to be working at a very high speed, but with no intention, plan, or direction. And it also references Bruce Lee. On page 84 of his 1979 book Zen in the Martial Arts, Joe Hyams claimed Bruce Lee read the following quote to him, attributed to the legendary Zen master Takuan Soho. I've never heard of him. The mind must always be in the state of flowing, for when it stops anywhere, that means the flow is interrupted, and it is this interruption that is injurious to the well-being of the mind. In the case of the swordsman, it means death. And it just so happens I'm wearing this shirt today. Hold on, I'll show you. Be like water. Somebody gave this to me on my recent tour in Europe. It's something that Bruce Lee said. The mind should be like water, my friend. I forget what the whole Bruce Lee quote is, and I just happened to pull this out of my drawer this morning and put it on without really thinking about it. And when I noticed that this quote was in here, I thought, oh God, I have to do this whole thing. But there's another quote I came across on zenbuddhism.net, and it says, Mushin is at the core of Zen and Japanese martial arts. It is a state of mind where the mind is not fixed on or occupied by any thought or emotion, and is thus connected to the cosmos. In Zen, in your daily life, that's what it says. Maybe it means and in your daily life. If the impulse is expressed in conscious thought, it is not Zen. This pure state of mind, of pure mental clarity, is produced by the absence of ego or limited self. A Mushin mind is not an empty mind like an empty shell. On the contrary, it is a mind fully present, aware, and free, etc., etc. A mind like a mirror, undistorted, without any ripples, where the surface reflects clearly, and so on and so forth. And that's what they say about Mushin, which is totally different from what I had planned to talk about when I decided to talk about Mushin. And I'll get to that in a minute. But when I saw that thing in ZenBuddhism.net, I'm like, who the hell does ZenBuddhism.net? And I tried to figure it out, and I still haven't figured it out. I only spent a few minutes trying to figure it out. But there's a lot of quotes from Taisen Deshimaru, who was a teacher in the Soto lineage, and he was also a friend of my teacher, Gudo Wafu Nishijima Roshi. So, and I like Deshimaru. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not so bad, but talk like the stuff that I just read you from Wikipedia and from ZenBuddhism.net, to me, it just really muddies the waters. To me, it's not very useful. And I've studied and practiced Zen for, God, just like 40 years now. And I never, ever once in all those 40 years of studying and practicing Zen, I never had a teacher who said anything like this stuff. Let me read. I don't know. You must have your, no, Nishijima Roshi or Tim McCarthy, my first teacher, never said you must have your mind not occupied by thought or emotion and being connected to the cosmos, or trained me in, I don't know, having no mind and being free of discursive thought, and being able to react towards an opponent without hesitation and disturbance of thought, and all this stuff, whatever I just read you. I never heard any of that kind of stuff. Now, having said that, it's not... They're not completely 100% wrong in what they're saying here. If you practice Zazen, something kind of like that does develop. But if you make that kind of your goal or an intention in practice, I think you're just going to go wrong. You're just going to get sloppy and weird. You're going to get into something that I think is probably not really very good for practice. Better to just do the kind of thing that I always talk about, and that my teachers actually did talk about, which is shikantaza practice, which is goalless practice. Just let go of anything. Don't try to achieve mushin. Don't try to achieve no mind. Don't try to achieve a mind free of thought. And I don't know. I've already forgotten what they said, even though I just read it to you, a minute and a half ago. Don't muddy yourself up trying to achieve this kind of special state of free from discursive concentration and blah blah blah, whatever the hell they said there. That's just going to mess you up if you try to work on something like that, or if you worry about something like that. Now, having said all that and read you the Wikipedia thing and the thing from whatever the hell it was, ZenBuddhism.net, I'll tell you what I was going to say, which thankfully I had that to go on, because it's not that much. The best book I know of, if you really want to know what no mind is in a scholarly sense, is this one, The Zen Doctrine of No Mind. I read this very early on in my practice because Tim McCarthy, my first Zen teacher, had this on his bookshelf, and I said, "Hey Tim, can I borrow that?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know if that's so good, but you can borrow it." And I took it with me. I was working some kind of temp job, don't even remember where, probably at some factory. I used to do a lot of temp work at factories, so on my breaks and lunch periods I would read different books that I had, or when I was just hanging out. And I remember reading this book. It's kind of short, and it didn't have this cover on it. I think it was an older hardcover version of it. And it was very scholarly, and it kind of confused me. But one thing this book has that's kind of interesting to me personally is it has the little poetry contest of Huineng. It's written so that you tend to pronounce it Huineng. He's the sixth patriarch of Zen Buddhism, and he's kind of famous, and there's a whole story around him, which I always forget how the whole story goes. But he was an illiterate, and his teacher wanted to find his true successor. His teacher was getting old and wanted to retire, and he wanted to find a true successor, and so he had all his students write a poem. And the best student wrote this one poem, and Huineng, who couldn't read, said, hey, to one of the other students, said, hey, dude, can you read me this poem? And the dude read him the poem, and Huineng thought that poem stunk on ice, and so Huineng wrote his own poem, and came up with his own poem, and asked the other guy to write it for him. And then that poem got presented, and then the teacher supposedly said, that's the one who should be my successor, said Huineng should be his successor. This caused a big problem because Huineng was an illiterate, and I think he was working in the tool shed or something. He was doing some kind of menial labor and wasn't a favored student at the time, and he had to kind of run off and take the Dharma transmission in secret. There's a whole story behind it, and it's kind of a fascinating read if you want to go look it up. But the reason I bring that poetry contest up is because I'd forgotten. I'd read that different versions of the story, and in every version I read for years and years, the two poems didn't rhyme. And I remembered reading a version where the poems rhymed, the English versions of the poem, and I'm like, why do I remember reading a version where the poems rhymed? And then finally, I got my hands again on a copy of this book, and I realized this is the version, D.T. Suzuki's version is the version where the poems rhyme, and I'm going to read them to you so you can hear it. And the first poem, this is where the whole no mind thing comes in. That's why I'm telling you this whole stupid story. So the first poem goes like this. This is the one written by the student who was kind of the favorite to get the Dharma transmission from Huineng's teacher. Our body is the Bodhi tree being the tree under which Buddha got enlightened. Our body is the Bodhi tree, and our mind a mirror bright. Carefully we wipe them hour by hour, and let no dust alight. That was the poem. And Huineng's poem in response to this was, there is no Bodhi tree, nor stand of mirror bright. Since all is void, where can the dust alight? And from this stems the doctrine of no mind Mushin, because he's saying there is no mind from which we are wiping the dust. That's the idea of that. And this whole idea of no mind kind of comes out of that poem. Sorry, I'm being inarticulate today. And that's kind of where it all got started. And the reason this is interesting to me is, if any of you have read my books, Don't Be a Jerk and It Came From Beyond Zen, you will notice that whenever I quote a poem that Dogen quotes in one of his writings, I make the poem rhyme. And the reason I make the poem rhyme is because the D.T. Suzuki made the poem rhyme in this book, and that's the only time I've ever seen anybody quote old Chinese Zen poems and make them rhyme, but I liked it, and I decided to make all the poems rhyme, and that's where I got the ideas from this book, in case you wanted to know. So that's where the whole Mushin thing got started, the whole no mind thing got started. And for a really deep dive into Huineng's philosophy, although it doesn't specifically talk a lot about no mind, but it does talk a lot about Huineng's philosophy, I would recommend this little book. It's Koben's Teaching on Platform Sutra is what it's called, and it's by Koben Chino Otogawa Roshi, who was the guy I referenced. Was it in my previous... I guess it was, the last video I did on Wednesday, the previous video to this one. I talked about Koben. Koben was my first teacher's teacher. I have the printout of this, which I think you can order from Jikoji, which is the monastery that Koben established in, where was it? Somewhere in Northern California. You can also go on Jikoji's website and download the thing as a PDF. which is cheaper than ordering the printout, but I like to have the printout, so I got the printout. But if you want to just get it on the cheap, just go to jikoji.org or something. I'm not sure. Just look up Jikoji on Google and you'll find it. Jikoji, Jikoji. And you can get this as a PDF and read it for yourself. And even though it doesn't go into the whole no mind thing in detail, it does go into a lot of Huineng's philosophy, which I think is kind of better. But the confusing thing about no mind is that Zen also has this philosophy that you can find in one of my all-time favorite books about Zen, the Zen teachings of Huang Po, who right at the very beginning of his teachings says, all the Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind beside which nothing exists. So you have, on the one hand, Huang Po, who says everything is the one mind, and then you have Huineng, who is of the same teaching lineage, who says no mind. So you have everything is the mind, and you have no mind. So Zen is nothing if not contradictory, and it's just kind of, it depends on the context in which you're talking. So in the context in which Huineng was talking, no mind is the valid expression, and in the context in which Huang Po was talking, everything is the one mind. It gets really tricky, and if you really want to get into it in more detail than I can possibly get into it in this video, read this book. Although I have to kind of caution you, D.T. Suzuki was a great scholar and a great practitioner of Rinzai style Zen, but at least as far as I'm concerned, if you want somebody who kind of understands Zen a little better, look to the works of the other Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki. I think he's a better guide for sort of the practice of Zen. D.T. Suzuki is much more of a scholar and a wordsmith, and he understands the philosophy, and he can explain the kind of history and philosophical underpinnings of it. But his actual understanding of it in practical terms, sometimes I'm a little iffy on it. I don't want to disparage the man because he was such a good scholar, but there are times when it leaves me feeling a little flat. So I don't know if that was much of an explanation of no mind. If you have questions, please ask them, and I'll try to address them in future videos. I kind of feel like maybe I didn't go as far as I should have in this video, and just let me know what I've left out and tell me, and I'll try to address it, and I might do another no mind video, but I feel like this one's already gone on a little longer than I wanted it to. So if you want to contribute to me doing another video on no mind, there's a good segue. You can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and my Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. See you later. Bye. Okay, once again, Ziggy refuses to come outside because it's too cold. So here he is in his warm little doggy bed. I don't know if you could hear him sigh just then. Alright, Ziggy, I'm going to go edit the video. I'm going to let you sleep. I know you got to sleep because you've been sleeping, and all that sleeping made you sleepy. Alright, we'll talk to you later, Ziggy. Bye.